Welcome everyone. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm a lecturer at the University of Manchester. I teach on the DOLS, the BIA programme, DOLS programme and the AMP programme. I'm also just about still a practising AMP as well. So I've got you till 12 o'clock today to talk about the interface between the Mental Health Act and the Mental Capacity Act and DOLS. So there's a picture on screen here. Does anybody know what this picture signifies? You can shout out the answer for this one. Does anybody know what on earth this picture signifies? Any takers?
Head in a spin.
I think it's
Head in a spin, perfect. So one of the key judges who's done a lot, given a lot of the judgments about this, Mr. Justice Charles, who's retired now. But the main cases that have led to the development of the law have been given by him. And he said that trying to apply the Mental Health Act and the Mental Capacity Act, it's like putting your head in a washing machine, taking it out and putting it in a tumble dryer. So yeah, it's if your head's spinning a little bit by midday today, you're in good company. So yeah, a bit of preamble really. The materials, the slides should have been emailed to you. I think I've tinkered with them a little bit this morning. As I say, it's been recorded. We've got till 12, so I want to have an interactive discussion. So I want people to talk to me, have their say. There's no wrong answers. We're going to stop for a comfort break about 11 o'clock-ish. Can I ask, because we are a big group when everyone gets here, please, if possible, can people put their team's hand up to vote? We really want people to contribute. I've also got chat open. I've struggled to speak and monitor the chat at the same time. I've got two screens open, so hopefully I can do it. But I may miss things in the chat. So if people can just monitor the chat and let me know if there's any pertinent questions. So the plan for today is by 12 o'clock, I'm hoping that everybody here will be able to understand a basic model, a tool, to help them to understand when a person's admitted to hospital for mental health care, whether we should use the Mental Capacity Act or the Mental Health Act. So this, what I'm talking about today, only applies where somebody requires mental health care in hospital. So I've got a question to try and sort of get people thinking about this. So it's a true or false question. I'm going to put this out via the polls app. So this should be working its way to you. So DOLS plus the Mental Health Act can be used to detain a person with schizophrenia on a mental health ward and to give them treatment with antipsychotic medication. So let's see if this is going to work today. So I'm hoping that the question will pop up on people's screens and people can see this. So I'm going to give people about 60 seconds to answer this question. If you haven't got the option to vote, then by all means put your answer in the chat. So we've got 19 responses out of 33 people. Actually, I think there's myself and Emma. So I think there's 11 more people left to vote. So if you haven't got the option to vote, by all means, put your answer in the chat. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close the poll. So the scores are 27% of people said true, 73% of people said false. Does anybody have a very strong opinion they want to share? There's a couple of people on this call today who've done AMP training with us before, so I'm going to ask you guys, you should know this stuff, not to answer this. But for those who've not done the AMP training with us, has anybody got a strong opinion about this? Anyone want to put their hand up for this one? Any takers? Go on, Maggie. You should know this, I think, but go on. You muted, Maggie. Maggie?
Does it depend whether the person is objecting to their treatment on the mental health ward? So if they lack capacity, but they aren't objecting in any way, shape or form, whether that be by resisting care or trying to leave or low threshold for objection, but if they're not objecting, could it be used? Could the Mental Capacity Act be used?
I think so. I'm doing it. So you're saying it's true then? In certain circumstances, the Mental Capacity Act can be used.
I mean, it never is because.
Okay.
Okay,
you're saying
but that's for other reasons. But in theory,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Esther, you got your hand up as well.
I'm just thinking that I did put true, but when I reread it, I've changed my mind.
Why
I feel that you cannot use DOLS and the Mental Capacity Act to detain anyone. Any person who is detained, they are only detained under the Mental Health Act. DOLS and the MCA, they are there to help the person who is in any hospital or care home, to protect them from going, should they want to go out, but they can't. So it comes in place, but not to detain them, to give them treatment and antipsychotic. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well,
maybe
just to be clear, I mean, the word detention and deprivation of liberty, they're interchangeable. It means it's the same thing. Sometimes lawyers talk about the phrase confinement. So under Article 5 of the Human Rights Act, that person is detained in a specific physical location and requires additional legal safeguards. But okay, I hope I pronounced your name. Aliu?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Yeah.
What do you think?
My response was true. When I was reading through the question again, I think it's false.
Okay.
Because I've got this client that whenever I think the police, the mental health personnel, whenever they arrive to take him to the ward, he declined. So he still stays in the supported accommodation he is. So I think if it's something that is like compulsory on them to take him to, they would, but it's always having like what's it called? Self-harming thoughts, suicidal thoughts, and things like that. So I think it's false.
Okay, you think it's false. Okay, I'll give you the answer for this and we'll talk about why soon. The answer for this is true. So there is the potential for somebody to be detained under DOLS on a mental health ward with schizophrenia and for their medication to be given under the Mental Capacity Act in their best interests in certain circumstances. So I've got a case study for you here. Now, I'm hoping we're going to be able to put you in breakout groups just for 10 minutes to have a think about this one. It didn't work the other day when we tried to do breakout rooms, so it might not work this time. But case study, Joanne, she's a 76-year-old white woman. She's been brought to A&E. Paramedics were alerted that she was walking alone down a canal bank. It's a freezing cold day. She was wearing no clothes and the bottom half of her body, and she'd been doubly incontinent. She's been assessed as being medically fit and there's no evidence of infection. So we know that she was previously referred to the Later Life Memory Service 6 months ago by a GP. There were concerns about deteriorating memory. She didn't go to the appointments for the assessments. So Joanne has daily contact with her neighbour. Her neighbour tries to prompt her to eat and ensure she's safe. The neighbour Jane reports that Joanne frequently gets lost in the community when going to buy cigarettes and leaves her front door open. Apparently the home is completely insanitary. It wouldn't be safe for her to go back there. So there's agreement that she needs to come into hospital, and they found a later life mental health bed for her to keep her safe and to do further assessments of her physical and mental health. So upon interview, Joanne is very distressed and crying. She appears to recognise that she's been brought to hospital, but when asked about the possibility of admission, she's pressured in speech and says, "I don't know anything." So she gets some lorazepam, to calm her down, some PRN medication, but it's still not possible to confirm that she's aware of the specific details of the admission. She appears very fixed in her belief that she's currently in Ireland, and she's been admitted for the treatment of gastroenteritis whilst visiting relatives in Ireland. So that's the situation. What I want to know from you people is, what's the most appropriate legal framework for her to be under while she's in hospital? So Andrea, I don't know if it's going to work. Do you want to sort of see if we can put people in groups for, say, about 4 or 5 people per room?
Let's see what I can do.
If it doesn't work, then we will stay where we are and do this together. People should have this slide as well. What I'll also do when you go into the groups, if it works, I will send you a copy of the scenario via the chat.
Do you need to be in one of the groups, or shall I take you out?
No, I don't.
Okay, I have rooms ready, so I'm just going to send everybody into their rooms now.
Well, it's now 10:14, so I'm going to give you till nearly 10:25 to deal with this, yeah? So have a chat, introduce yourself to the people in the groups. Remember as well, the group's not recorded, so please put your cameras on and share your cameras with the people in the group so they can see who you are. So back here in about 10 minutes, what's the most appropriate legal framework for Joanne's admission to hospital?
Okay, room's opening now.
Fantastic.
Hopefully people should start disappearing, but it doesn't look like it's working.
I think a few people have.
It says 10 seconds on my screen.
Oh yeah, they're going.
Hiya.
I think
Hi.
you come out when you should be assigned. Just bear with me a
Oh,
minute.
sorry.
Don't worry, it's fine. I think I got the wrong person.
Do I admit? Shall I admit?
There you go.
Stephen. Oh no, that's somebody coming in, isn't it, to the name?
Yeah. Right, you should start disappearing soon.
Thank you.
Give it a minute.
Oh, got the 10-second warning. Thank you.
Oops. Hi, Andrea. You okay?
Hello.
Hiya. You okay? I think.
I'm fine. I got the wrong person. It's all right. It's not you.
No worries.
Right.
The great. Could you do me a favour? If I put the scenario in the chat, is there any way you can send it to people in the breakout groups? Could you copy that at all? The thing in the chat, and you can broadcast it to the breakout groups.
I think so.
So I don't know if you're able to copy that. Has that worked?
Oh, I've got it.
Okay. If you go to breakout,
Trying to
so if you go to
send
breakout,
it on.
there's a little the little like sort of microphone where you configure the breakout rooms to enable you to broadcast, I think, to the groups.
I don't seem to have it.
Ah, no worries. Alternatively, what I can do is I'll email it to people. I think I've got the things for everybody in the. So let me see if I can email it to people. Joanne. Oops. Janine, sorry. Give me the wrong one there. What am I doing? I've actually put the wrong one in the chat as well. Oh well.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Mark.
You okay, Stephen?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I think I'm in the chat room, but I haven't got anybody with me other than yourself. I'm
Right.
here.
I'm on my way back. Hang on.
Okay, good.
Did you get the option, Stephen, to join the group, or?
I think I just received something like a link and says join, and I just click join.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Probably.
saying you're in the meeting, so you should be there.
I think you normally on top of your screen you get a little sort of sign saying please click on this to join the breakout group. So
Yeah, that was okay.
don't worry. You okay? Just if it doesn't work, just you okay? Just sit tight for a few minutes and we'll get you sorted.
Looks like they're being booted out.
Are they?
Yeah, actually, so another person's just turned up.
I think that could be someone.
Dropped
Sorry,
out.
I've only just come on because I was
Yeah,
doing
I know.
allocations this morning,
It's okay,
Mark.
Stephanie.
Sorry.
It's okay. I tell you what, we've put people in breakout rooms, so we think they're sort of safely ensconced in the breakout.
It's all right.
So yeah.
Hi, Neville. I don't know if you can hear me, but I think they've booted you out of room 4 again.
There's always one or two people who the breakout rooms don't work for. Very
I have
occasionally.
noticed.
Yeah. So let's just see. Wale's here. So. Hi, Wale. We just let you know we've got people put people in breakout rooms. We're going to keep them. What time do we say? We're going to be another few minutes, and then we'll sort of get people out. So just sit tight for a few moments.
All right. Thank you.
The good thing about Zoom, when you do it on Zoom, you can actually share the screen with the people in the breakout rooms, but Teams doesn't let you do that. So yeah, but it works better in other ways, Teams. So have I been Andrea? Have I? Andrea?
Hello.
Did I call you Emma? Have I been calling you Emma before?
No, you've been calling me Andrea.
So I say I thought I'd call you Emma. So when you go to the breakout room tab, you don't have the option to. There's nothing there to with a little microphone.
No, unfortunately, no.
Must be I think it depends on which version of Teams that you're using. Because useful, would you like send reminders, for instance, that it's like.
I can send chat reminders, which I've just done to give the 2-minute warning to say,
Okay.
we're closing soon. And I'm going to send another one now just to say room's closing.
Okay. What do we say? 25 past, didn't we?
Yeah, so we've basically got about a few seconds left.
Okay.
Oh dear.
You okay, Neville?
Hello.
You okay?
Not so bad. I'm just about gone on now.
Okay, it's fine. Shall we get? Oh, do you want to get people out, Andrew? Okay. Just going to give people. I think it normally takes about 30 seconds to get people
When
back.
someone still lack capacity, in the case of this person, I assume that she doesn't have.
Back in the main room now, so I'm just going to mute people for the time being. So welcome back, people. So Joanne, she's been brought to the emergency department. She's in a bad state, walking down the canal bank, disorientated. There's a referral to the memory service. Neighbour reports sort of squalid home services. So they need to bring her into hospital for further assessment. They've got a bed on a later life mental health ward. She's very distressed, repeatedly says, I don't know anything. Once they've got a bit of rapport going with her, she appears to recognise that she's in hospital, but doesn't really recognise the details of the admission as planned. She thinks she's in Ireland and she's been treated for gastroenteritis. So I'm going to just pose an additional question for you. Do you think that Joanne has capacity? Yes or no? So let's put that out there for you. Let's reopen the poll. So hopefully that should be on its way to you right now. Does Joanne have capacity? Yes or no? So just going to give you about 60 seconds again for this, but I'm just interested, what are your thoughts? Does Joanne have capacity? So 3 people have responded so far. Oh no, a few more people have responded. So I want to see 34 responses for this one.
It's coming up saying the poll is closed.
Right.
Yeah, I can't.
The poll is closed.
Okay.
Right.
There you go. What did they say? Don't work with children, animals, and technology, I think. I'll tell you what then, if it's reopened, I'll give people an extra 20 seconds for this. Right, 10 more seconds. I think there's still 11 people left to vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's close the poll and look at the scores. So 4% of people said yes, she's got capacity. 25% of people said we don't know, maybe, and 71% of people said no. Okay, the people who said maybe, what does the law say we should do if we're not sure whether a person's got capacity?
Assume capacity.
Yeah. So all of you who are saying maybe are actually saying yes, she's got capacity, because you're saying there's no evidence to disprove the assumption of capacity. So 29% of people are saying yes, she's got capacity. 71% of people are saying she lacks capacity. Anybody want to share their opinion about this one with us? People who said no, she lacks capacity, what's your rationale? Anybody who said no want to share with us why they said no, why they think she lacks capacity? Go on, Laura.
I'm not entirely sure because I'm relatively new to mental health, but my instinct was that because she lacks insight so like I guess fluctuating capacity, because she lacks insight into her current circumstances and believes she's elsewhere, that she couldn't give, you know, an accurate, informed consent as to her if she should be in hospital or not.
I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good. The fact that, you know, to give consent to admission to hospital for mental health care, what the courts have said, the person needs to know they're in hospital for mental health care. They need to know that the door's going to be locked. They're going to be closely supervised. There's probably going to be a discussion with them about medication, and they need to understand that if they want to leave, there's going to be some kind of assessment of their safety. So the fact that she believes she's in Ireland and she's in hospital for treatment of gastroenteritis, if you've used all practical steps to support her to make the decision, and she keeps repeating that, then she lacks capacity in terms of understanding and retaining and weighing the information. And I think it's fair to say, on the balance of probabilities, that's because of a cognitive impairment. So I think there's fairly clear evidence here to disprove the assumption of capacity. All I'd say, just gently say, is sometimes lawyers flinch when we talk about, use the word insight in relation to capacity. Insight tends to be a psychiatric word. And if you disagree with doctors, you lack insight. And what the lawyers say, that's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean capacity. That was covered in the NICE guidance on mental capacity from 2018. Just be careful about using the word insight capacity. Use the words unable to understand, unable to retain, unable to weigh. They're probably preferable words. Okay, next question for you then. Based on your independent personal opinions and based on your discussions in the groups, what would be the best legal framework for admission to hospital? So again, I'm going to sort of see, I think I need to reopen this one. So hopefully this has winged its way to you and you should be able to sort of answer the question. As before, I'll give you 60 seconds for this one. Okay, coming up to the last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close the poll and see the scores. So I've got it that 8% of people said informal, 32% of people said Mental Health Act, and 60 people said MCA plus DOLS. I'm just going to touch on the informal answers. What's the legal problem with Joanne coming into hospital informally? If we're saying she lacks capacity to give consent, what's the problem with her?
She can leave at any time.
Well, she probably won't be able to leave at any time. As we said before, if she comes onto a mental health ward and she lacks capacity, the doors are going to be locked. She's going to be really closely supervised. And if she wants to leave, there's going to be some kind of assessment of her risk. John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, she'd need to have capacity to agree to an informal admission.
Okay. What if she lacks capacity legally? What's the problem with her coming in informally?
She's being detained.
Okay, good. So historically,
she'd need a DOLS.
Yeah, or she would need legal safeguards.
Yeah.
So up until 2014, when we had Cheshire West and we had the acid test, generally a lot of people who were on mental health wards weren't able to give consent, especially later life wards, people with dementia, but they're all there informally. And that was felt to be a less restrictive option. What Cheshire West said is where people are in physically detained or deprived of liberty in a restrictive environment, they need additional legal safeguards. And that can be, in some cases, Mental Health Act. In other cases, it can be DOLS. In other cases, in certain settings, it can be a COP DOL. So there's a problem. If a person doesn't have capacity to consent to voluntary admission, then they need legal safeguards. That's what the law says. Okay, just going back to the poll results though. Anybody got a strong opinion? Anyone who said Mental Health Act or MCA DOLS? Anybody want to share with us their opinions? What's people's rationale? Any takers?
Hi, if I'm honest, I said MCA and DOLS, but for simple reason that I felt it was the least restrictive. I know her age weren't in there, but it did talk about later life and a possible memory loss. Not uncommon that people wonder and sometimes about close with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So I felt that if we assessed her and she lacked capacity, put a DOLS in place to prevent her leaving, medication might stabilise her.
The DOLS would be less restrictive than the Mental Health Act in this case. Okay.
I felt so.
Anyone who says, Steph, you've got your hand up. Are you a Mental Health Act person?
Yeah, so in our group, we were kind of a bit in the middle still because we felt actually it could fit into either. And we had the discussion around how, I mean, if you think about restriction, Mental Capacity Act and DOLS, so whether it's Mental Health Act or Mental Capacity Act, the person's still they're not allowed to leave freely, they're still being treated kind of against their will. So we were questioning, is it any less restrictive to use Mental Capacity Act? And with the Mental Health Act, you've got the right of appeal as well. There's that added kind of safeguards with the Mental Health Act. So we kind of acknowledged, yes, you could use MCA and DOLS, but you'd probably need to have a conversation with the accepting psychiatrist as well. We felt like there might need to be some conversation there if the person was coming in, under Capacity Act and looking at best interest, working for medication. Whereas the Mental Health Act, obviously, she could potentially meet the criteria for the Mental Health Act for assessment. If it's suspected around a dementia, for example, and she's severely neglecting herself, there's those risks. So you could argue Mental Health Act potentially as well. And she's got the the added protections of the tribunal.
I said no.
So we still weren't 100% in either part, if you will.
I'll tell you what.
So I said, all right. I said, I'll
go on, sorry, Steph. Go on, Steph, sorry. Yeah.
So we kind of left it where we weren't 100% decided. And I said, I'm an aunt myself, and I really struggle with this in a way, hence why I'm here today, around when you'd use MCA, when you'd use Mental Health Act. And that was the summary of our discussion, really. We were very much, we weren't 100% sure which one we would use. She could fit into either potentially. Yeah.
So on the fence, basically. Okay. Just to say, so if she comes into hospital, the legal framework she's on will make no difference, hopefully, to the kind of care and treatment she receives. She should receive exactly the same care and treatment, and the admission should last exactly the same. What the Code of Practice says is that neither the MCA and DOLS or the Mental Health Act is less restrictive or stigmatising than the other. Sometimes you need to work out which offers the best safeguards for the individual patient in the specific circumstances. So, okay, let's work this out. Let's work this out. There's an answer to this one. There's 2 questions that you have to ask that will help you determine what legal framework to use anytime somebody needs to be in hospital for mental health care. Does anybody know? People who are AMPs, I'm going to ask you to back out of this one for the time being, because you know this stuff. But there's 2 questions. Somebody mentioned them before. But what are the 2 questions you need to ask? So any non-AMPs want to be brave and sort of say, anytime somebody comes into hospital for mental health care, we need to ask 2 key questions. Any takers?
Are they a risk to themselves and others?
That comes into it, but that's more to do with whether they need to be in hospital in the first place rather than the framework. In terms of the legal framework and whether we use MCA or Mental Health Act, there's two key questions. One of them.
Are they refusing treatment?
Okay, good. So one is.
Did they consent to treatment?
What's their attitude towards treatment? So the first question you need to ask is, are they compliant? Are they objecting? So there's different degrees of compliance, different degrees of objection. You could be in the middle somewhere. You go from being an objecting patient to being a compliant patient, but there's a continuum. Legally, you're either compliant or objecting, but there's different degrees. You could have somebody who's been brought in by the police, brought into an intensive care unit, put in seclusion and given intramuscular sedation. You could have somebody who's in hospital who doesn't want to be there from their own free choice, but they're there because the doctors have told them they've got to stay. They're still legally objecting. So you need to work out, is this somebody who's compliant or are they objecting? What's the other question we just mentioned? Somebody shouted it out before. What's the other question? Anybody shout it out?
Do they have capacity to understand?
Yeah. So the other question is, do they have capacity regarding admission to hospital for mental health care? That's the question. So again, there's a continuum here. This end of the spectrum, someone completely lacks capacity. Up here, someone has 100% capacity. There's different degrees of having capacity and lacking capacity. But legally, it's a yes/no binary thing. You either have capacity or you lack capacity. And when you're assessing capacity, when you're considering capacity, the starting point is the person's there. They're assumed to have capacity. Until you can demonstrate, you can record the reasons why you've disproved that assumption of capacity. So I'm going to go slowly here and just, if people have got questions, fire them away. But anyone who comes into hospital will fit into one. I use the word patient because that's the legal word that the Mental Health Act uses. But anyone coming into hospital for mental health care will fit into one of these 4 categories. So people with capacity who are compliant, people who have capacity who are objecting, people who lack capacity who are objecting, and people who lack capacity who are compliant. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? So everybody who comes into hospital for mental health care will fit into one of those 4 categories. Okay, let's start with these people in the top right-hand corner. So if you've got somebody who's got capacity and they're compliant with the decision to go into hospital for them coming into hospital. So somebody compliant who's got capacity, who can give consent. Anybody shout it out. What would be the legal basis for that person's admission?
Informal.
Yeah, what's the word for informal?
Voluntary.
Yeah, voluntary. So they are giving informed consent to be a voluntary patient. Like I said, the fact that a person's willing to go into hospital, that's not informed consent to a mental health admission. There was a case called LDV in 2013 that I think it's Mr. Justice Baker said that in order for somebody to give informed capacitous consent to voluntary admission, they need to understand they're coming into hospital for mental health care. The doors are likely to be locked. There's probably going to be discussion about medication. They're going to be closely supervised. And if they want to leave, there's going to be some kind of discussion about risk and mental health. So it's actually a fairly high threshold in terms of the relevant information they need to get their head round to give consent. Are people okay with that? Anybody got any questions about that? So generally, if a person has capacity and they're consenting, they can come in as a voluntary patient. What about the people who have capacity but are objecting? What would be a legal basis for bringing them into hospital? Anyone shout out the answer?
Mental Health Act.
Yeah. So even though a person has capacity, you can still be detained in hospital if you meet the criteria under the Mental Health Act, which is basically you've got a mental disorder, you're a risk to your own health, safety or protection of others, and there's no less restrictive alternative. So you could be detained under a Section 2 for assessment or a Section 3 for treatment. And not only can you be detained in hospital, you can also be given medication against your wishes. Completely contrary, if you've got a physical health problem and you've got capacity, you can refuse admission and you can also refuse treatment. If you've got mental health issues, you can be detained in hospital with capacity and given medication against your wishes. What about the people over here? The people who lack capacity but are objecting. What would be a legal basis for bringing those people into hospital? Again, anybody want to shout that out? Somebody said, I didn't quite hear that. Somebody said something.
That be a DOLS?
Not DOLS. What's the alternative to DOLS?
Mental Health Act, isn't it?
Yeah, someone said Mental Health Act. So where a person lacks capacity and they're objecting to being in hospital, that's the key word, then we have to use the Mental Health Act. What the law says, and it's one of these schedules that's an addition to the Mental Capacity Act. It's Schedule 1A, and it's called KC. They're an objecting mental health patient. So they're ineligible for the Mental Capacity Act and DOLS. So this doesn't apply in care homes in the community. This only applies where somebody needs to be in hospital for some kind of mental health care. If they lack capacity and if they're objecting, then we have to use the Mental Health Act. Are people okay with that?
Yeah.
The interesting people are the people up here. So the people who lack capacity but are compliant, are actually happy to be in hospital. So historically, back in the day, these people were always informal.
Yeah.
These people used to come in, and the majority of people on later life wards were people with dementia who were informal. Cheshire West came along in 2014 and said, yeah, mental health wards generally, I can't think of a situation where anybody who lacks capacity on a mental health ward wouldn't meet the acid test. So there's a requirement for that person to have legal safeguards under Article 5 of the Human Rights Act. So we can no longer, if you can't give consent to voluntary admission, you can no longer be informal. And what the law says is basically for these people, the people who are compliant but lack capacity, there's a choice. You can either use the Mental Capacity Act and DOLS or the Mental Health Act. And it's for the person arranging the admission. So it could be the psychiatrist, it could be the AMP, it could be the mental health tribunal, to work out which offers the best safeguards for that patient. And to some degree, it says if you're going to detain somebody under the Mental Health Act who's compliant, you need to explain why DOLS and MCA isn't appropriate for that person. So yeah, you could potentially, I could turn up at A&E today, I could be acutely psychotic, I could be quite happy to be in hospital. So technically, I could be admitted to hospital. So they could treat me with medication for my psychosis under best interests, under sections 5 and 6 of the MCA. And my legal detention in hospital, the legal powers to detain me on the ward could be provided under DOLS, and I could get safeguards under DOLS. So there's a choice for either MCA or Mental Health Act, but it only applies to people who lack capacity and are compliant. And yeah, this is in the Mental Health Act Code of Practice. It comes from this case called AM versus South London and Maudsley Trust, where the judge I was talking about before, the washing machine judge and tumble dry judge, said that, yeah, for non-objecting patients, there is a choice between the Mental Health Act and DOLS. And the Mental Health Act Code of Practice says that neither regime is less stigmatising or restricting. Because, yeah, it's not very nice being under something called deprivation of liberty safeguards. It's trying to work out what's the best safeguards for that individual patient.
Is there more, just think about it, is there more rights under the Mental Health Act than the mental
I can't quite hear you, sorry. Somebody's, can you want to get a bit closer to your microphone?
Yeah, all it is, I'm just thinking, is there more legal rights under the Mental Health Act than the Mental Capacity Act for an individual?
I think that's debatable, Neville. Can we come back to that? Some people think there are better safeguards under the Mental Health Act. Other people argue that the safeguards are better under MCA and DOLS. So we'll come to that in a bit. But yeah, some people say that the Mental Health Act is better in these kind of circumstances. Other people veer towards DOLS. Anybody, just in terms of this basic model, what I'm saying here, does anybody want me to clarify anything I've said over the last 10 minutes in terms of how I got here? Elise?
Hi, in our group, we talked about conveying somebody to hospital.
Yeah.
And we were on the lines of thinking that the Mental Health Act would help us do that.
Yeah.
Rather than the DOLS. Yeah, right.
So if you've got somebody who's compliant, who's in A&E and needs to go to hospital, but you're scared by the time they find a bed, and it could be the other side of the country in current circumstances, that they might change their mind, or you're concerned about them sort of, I don't know, trying to abscond, then they're probably objecting. And we take them to be objecting, and we go down the Mental Health Act route. So if there's a risk that we go down the Mental Health Capacity Act route and somebody's going to change their mind, especially during conveyance, then it's Mental Health Act. We're only talking about MCA and DOLS for the people who are truly content, truly compliant, happy people to some degree. But yeah, it can't be informal. They've got to have some kind of safeguards under Article 5. Any other questions about where we're up to so far? Because there's a big caveat coming in a minute. So I tell you what, we'll promise you a break every hour. Let's stop and have a break until 5 minutes past 11. So with the condition that people try and get away from their screens, don't do any emails, and we'll see you back here at 5 past 11. Okay, we're going to restart in about 1 minute, people. So restarting in 1 minute, please.
Let's see if everybody comes back now.
Yeah. I think Home's Under the Hammer starting, isn't it? So we may get less people participating now. Somebody says the cricket's starting as well today. So I've had a couple of WhatsApp messages from people who are
Well, if
not
that's on, my husband's
working
got
from.
to go view.
Say again.
And that's
I said if that's on, I said it's over at Old Trafford. My husband's got to go to view. His building where he works is right next door. He actually looks out over the ground. I envy him very much, actually.
Yeah, I think I said I've had a couple of WhatsApps from friends who it's a euphemism, working from home. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've got several
Well,
open.
my husband's working in the room. I'm in the dining room, and I know he's got cricket on. That's why he's in the room. He'd never normally be in the room.
I'm personally, I'm not a cricket fan, so it's easy for me to. I'd rather watch Home with the Hammer, I think. But okay, we're back, people. It's 11:05. So I'm just gonna have a sip of tea, and we'll go on. So brief recap in terms of where we're up to so far. So we've talked if somebody needs to be in hospital, and the reason for that is mental health care. There's two key questions you need to ask. You need to ascertain whether they've got capacity or not, and whether they're compliant or objecting. The law says you've either got capacity or you lack capacity, or you're compliant or objecting. And if you truly are compliant, if you truly are capacitous, and you can understand what you're consenting to in terms of the restrictions on a mental health ward, or it might not necessarily be a mental health ward, it could be a general medical ward. But if you truly understand what you're consenting to, locked doors, supervision, restrictions on leave, and you're aware you're coming into hospital for mental health care, then you can be a voluntary patient. If you have capacity but object, then it's Mental Health Act. And if you lack capacity and object, then it's Mental Health Act. But the interesting people are the people who lack capacity but are compliant. And we're saying for these people, they can't be informal. They require Article 5 safeguards under the Human Rights Act because they're going to meet the acid test. So we need to either use the Mental Capacity Act with DOLS or the Mental Health Act. So before we go on, I'm just going to pause and just see, has anybody got any issues, any comments, any questions? Or has everyone gone off to watch the cricket? So it's all making perfect sense to people. Okay. In my experience, it takes a couple of goes to get your head around this. It took me a couple of years to get my head around it. So there's no stupid questions. There's no wrong answers, really. It's a learning experience, this. So, okay, I'm just going to pose a question for you then. So, in England, at the moment, what's the average waiting time for the completion of a DOLS authorisation? So from referral until it's signed off by the local authority. What's the average waiting time? So let's put this out there as a polling question. And I think people should be able to vote on this one. So, whoops, let's reopen the poll. So, as before, we will give you up to a minute to answer this one. So 5 options. What's the average time from referral till completion?
Ooh.
Okay, 21 responses so far. Let's see a few more. Okay, last couple of seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So yeah, looking at the scores, 11% of people said 40 days. 41% of people said 83 days. 26% of people 120 days. 11% of people 142 days, and 11% of people said 153 days. The right answer, drum roll, is 153 days. So the latest data from NHS Digital said for 2021 to 2022, and I think the new data is going to be published in August for the current 12 months, that on average, if you're in a care setting, if you're in hospital or in a care home, it's going to take on average this 153 days from referral until you get your safeguards. So going back to this question about whether we use the Mental Capacity Act and DOLS or the Mental Health Act, does that put a different complexion on things for people? What's the issue that we've got?
The length of time to get a DOLS.
Yeah, so the big problem with DOLS, not just in mental health settings or in any setting, in care homes for people with dementia, people with learning disabilities, you can go into the care setting and they can use an urgent authorization for up to 7 days. That gives them the permission to detain you for 7 days. There's no safeguards in that time. There's no legal aid. You can't apply to the court or anything like that. It just means that they've got 7 days where they can legally detain you, during which time the assessments are due to occur. But after that 7 days, in exceptional circumstances, it could be 14 days, you're unlawfully detained until you get your DOLS assessment and it's signed off by the local authority, during which time you're unlawfully detained. So let's say in Joanne's case before, let's say we decide that she lacks capacity and she's compliant. We've been in hospital, she's quite happy to be in hospital. We decide to use the Mental Capacity Act and DOLS. So she could come into hospital, she could be on the mental health ward, first 7 days will be lawful. Unless those assessments are completed within 7 days, then after that 7 days, she's just not going to have any legal safeguards at all, and she's going to be unlawfully detained. So in most areas in Greater Manchester, the assessments are taking far more, DOLS assessments are taking far more than 7 days. There's one area in Greater Manchester where DOLS assessments are actually occurring generally within the statutory timescale. Does anybody know what that is? I'm not sure if there's anyone here today from that area. There's one local authority that generally meet their timescales.
Is it Bury, Mark?
Yeah, it's Bury. So Bury they don't employ, or they employ very few in-house BIAs, but they employ a lot of independents. And generally, in Bury, DOLS would be an option as an alternative to the Mental Health Act. I'm aware from speaking to AMPS there, on a couple of occasions, they have used DOLS as an alternative. But in most places, in Greater Manchester, across England and Wales, it's not an alternative. So it leads us to the situation where we're detaining people in hospital, even though they're compliant to be there, because it's the only legal safeguard we can provide. Again, I'm going to pause. If anybody's got any comments, questions, any issues they want to bring in. The other issue we talked about is we said that we can't use MCA or DOLS if the person's objecting to their admission for mental health care. They become what they call objecting mental health patients. We have to use the Mental Health Act. So I'm just going to put this question out about what is an objection. So I've got 4 scenarios there. I'm going to put these out as a poll question soon, but I'll let you read these first. Which of the following is not an objection? So firstly, a person becoming tearful and pushing medication away when being given treatment for depression. B, A person with a history of psychosis and self-neglect refusing to engage with self-care. C, a person with dementia trying to walk off the ward to go to work at a factory that closed 40 years ago. Or D, a person with bipolar refusing to return to the ward when having leave in the hospital grounds. So I'll give you a minute to read those again. And I want to know which one of them is not an objection. So just hold your horses. We're gonna. I'll let people read them, and then we'll vote. Okay. I tell you what. Let's put it out there as a polling question. Objection. So this should be winging its way to you. I will give you a minute for this one.
I think A is repeated.
Who's that? Who said that? Sorry. Who's speaking?
Question A is repeated twice here.
Okay, just we'll have a discussion about this in a second. Just going to give people another 10 seconds to answer. I don't want anyone to influence the answers at the moment. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's end the poll. Let's close it, and let's see the scores. So one person said A, one person said B, 20 people said C, the person with dementia, and 2 people said D. What's this a picture of in the top right-hand corner of the page, of the slide? Anybody know?
A red herring.
Yeah, what's the red herring in relation? What does that mean, firstly, in relation to this question? It's a bit of a trick question, this.
Trick.
Okay, why is it a trick?
Because they could all be classed as not objecting.
Yeah,
They're
although
all-
as objecting.
As objecting, yeah.
These are all objections. Sorry, I mean, people get quite upset when they do this, but it's just a way of making points. Yeah, in terms of the legal guidance, in terms of what an objection is, it's basically what the Code of Practice says. The Mental Health Act Code of Practice 1351. Yeah, you don't have to wait for the person to go to the door of the ward and say, I want to leave. You don't have to wait for them to try and run away. Any inkling of objection, you have to be holistic, is an objection. And the fact that if a person say, I want to leave the ward, the reasonableness of that objection is not an issue. So the fact that someone with dementia wants to leave the ward to go and visit a factory that closed 40 years ago, the fact that it's a completely unreasonable objection doesn't matter. It's still an objection. If you had a 22-year-old with psychosis who wanted to leave the hospital to save the world, that would clearly be seen as an objection. But when it's someone with dementia, we look at things slightly differently. So if you're not sure about whether a person's objecting or not, the guidance says you err on the side of caution and take it that it's an objection. So they're all objections. We can only actually consider the use of MCA and DOLS if a person's truly compliant. Maggie, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in there? Is that
no, sorry, that was to say that they're all objections. So I'll lower it now.
So yeah, just going back to this basically, yeah. If a person, just going back to this model, if there's any inkling of objection, if a person gets near that line, if you're concerned that they may be objecting or you're not sure, then they're objecting mental health patients. If you have to have a discussion about whether it's an objection, it's an objection. You err on the side of caution. So yeah, the other things, in terms of what the Mental Health Act Code of Practice says, in terms of other pointers to use the Mental Health Act rather than MCA DOLS. So if a person's got fluctuating capacity, and they're not expected to consent when they regain. So you could have somebody at the moment who's, I don't know, acutely psychotic, catatonically psychotic. They can't really express an opinion. But we know full well that for 20 years, this person's hated mental health services. And it's very good reason to believe they're going to object when they regain capacity. That's an objection. The Mental Capacity Act allows you to use restraint in the person's own best interests. But where you're detaining somebody and you're supervising them, restraining them, controlling them for the protection of others or public protection, then that's a steer towards using the Mental Health Act, because it's not necessarily in their own best interests. And as we were talking before, if the risks are very high. So again, someone mentioned before about conveyance, that if you're concerned that the person, if we're looking at bringing him in under Mental Capacity Act and DOLS, that they're going to change their mind before getting to hospital during conveyance. Because the issue with DOLS and the issue with Mental Capacity Act, there aren't really any powers to convey outside the place where they're on a DOL. So if a person leaves hospital on a DOLS, there's no power to use restraint to bring them back. Whereas the Mental Health Act gives you those explicit powers to bring them back. People okay? Again, talk to me here if anyone's got any questions about what I'm saying. But yeah, in Joanne's case, yeah, potentially you could say this is somebody who lacks capacity, who's compliant. We'd have to make a decision about whether to use Mental Health Acts or MCA and DOLS. Probably at the moment, the rationale outside Bury would be that you use the Mental Health Act because DOLS isn't available within a suitable time limit. In Bury, it could be an option to use MCA DOLS. And it'd be a case of working out which offers the best safeguards for the patient. So in terms of best safeguards, both have their respective benefits. So the good thing about the Mental Health Act, you have what's called the Mental Health Tribunal. It's an informal court. On Section 2, they will hear the person's appeal within 7 days. Now, obviously, if the person's not objecting, they're not going to put him for a tribunal. Nearest relative under the Mental Health Act can apply for the person's discharge. And when a person's been in hospital for more than 3 months and given medication for more than 3 months, they get an independent second opinion doctor coming to review their treatment. Whereas the safeguards under MCA and DOLS are that, yeah, you can apply to court. It's a slower process than the Mental Health Act. But under Section 21A of the Mental Capacity Act, the judge in the Court of Protection has a lot more power than a Mental Health Tribunal in terms of trying to put things in place to speed up discharge. The person's representative, so-called RPR under DOLS, is a lot more person-centred than nearest relative under the Mental Health Act. Someone's nearest relative under the Mental Health Act might be somebody the patient's never seen for 10 years. They may be completely estranged from them. Whereas the RPR is somebody who maintains contact and would be willing to represent the person's wishes. The BIA under DOLS can impose statutory conditions to reduce the restrictions that must be upheld by the hospital. And generally, the focus is on welfare under the Mental Capacity Act, whereas the Mental Health Act is more about risk. So again, I'm going to pause for breath. Anybody got any questions? Okay, going to move on. Got a question for you here. The Mental Health Acts can be used to provide physical health treatment. What do people think? That's before 60 seconds. Okay, last 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close the polling and let's see the answers. So 58% of people said yeah, 42% of people said no. Anybody who's not an AMP want to answer this one? Anybody want to share with us their rationale?
Well, I put yes, but only if in my thoughts was if the physical health treatment was needed as a result of a mental health diagnosis.
Perfect. That's Cleo, is that yeah? Perfect, Cleo, yeah? So the Mental Health Act, yeah, it's about mental health treatment in hospital, but it also allows you to provide physical health treatment if it's required as a result of that person's mental disorder. So the legal word is if it's a manifestation of the mental disorder. So the classic would be a person, as a result of depression, severe depression, takes an overdose and requires physical health treatment for that overdose. You can do that under the Mental Health Act because it's a manifestation of the person's mental disorder. So it's section 63 of the Mental Health Act. Classic again, the other example is eating disorders. You give them physical treatment under the Mental Health Act because of the eating disorder. You can also use the Mental Health Act to provide personal care where somebody's chronically self-neglecting. This is something that's picked up in a lot of safeguarding adult reviews. I think it's quite a few people on the call today who were on the one I did on Tuesday about this misassumption of capacity. But we talked about this safeguarding adult review, that was Salford one, the case of Eric from a couple of years ago. And this was a man who had a history of depression and anxiety. And he got physical health problems, he got gastric problems, and it quite disabling for him. And he started refusing care, started refusing treatment, stopped taking medication, stopped eating, went up to his bed and pulled the covers over his head and told people to go forth and multiply. And was seen by the GP, district nurses, local authority, by countless people, all of whom said appears to have capacity, making an unwise decision. Nobody actually documented how they reached that decision. But capacity was seeming that it got to the critical point, and people saying, "Oh, we're thinking that's capacity now, but we're not sure." But capacity sort of seemed to be the focus in this case, and he was admitted to Salford Royal Hospital and died of starvation. And yeah, the coroner was quite critical about the misuse in this case of the presumption of capacity. But this was a man who had a history of depression and anxiety. And because of his physical health issues, he got very depressed, went to bed, started chronically neglecting himself. And the safeguarded adult view was that, okay, we could have considered capacity, we could have been better in our recording of the capacity assessment, but this was a man who was probably detainable under the Mental Health Act. He had depression and anxiety, had a mental disorder, there was a risk to his own health and safety, and there seemed to be no less restrictive way of providing care or treatment. So the argument was he could have been admitted to a medical ward, potentially under the Mental Health Act, and given medical treatment for the manifestations of his mental disorder. Again, quite a controversial statement I'm making there. I'm just wondering if anyone wants to, I don't know, pick that up. Any comments or questions, any thoughts on this?
I was just going to say that it could be fluctuating given his depression.
Yeah. And fluctuating capacity, what the courts are saying consistently now is where you've got fluctuating capacity and it's a decision about accommodation or it's a decision about care arrangements, then generally you're taken to lack capacity. Because the word they use, you need what the courts are talking about, longitudinal capacity. You need to have longer term capacity, sustained periods of capacity to make those kind of decisions. So where somebody's continually fluctuating in terms of capacity, then yeah, they lack capacity. When it's a decision about accommodation or care or treatment, the courts have been fairly clear about that. Where it's a and when they have capacity, in the brief periods when they may have capacity, and you try and get their views off them in terms of what they want to happen in their best interests at the time when they lack capacity. Any other comments on this, what I'm saying at the moment? Okay. Bottom line, if a person is in hospital, doesn't matter if it's a mental health ward or physical health ward, and the primary purpose or a significant part of their treatment is mental health care, and they're objecting, and there's a very low threshold for objection, then it's Mental Health Act. We can't use MCA DOLS. So this is probably, if you want to sort of sum it up in one sentence, hospital for mental health care with objection equals no DOL. This was a case that was fairly recently considered. It was a Manchester case, this. It was about a 17-year-old young person. She had a history of quite complex mental health issues. She'd previously been on a CAMHS ward and, yeah, very suicidal behaviour. Now, she took an overdose, quite a severe overdose, and she was admitted to a medical ward in hospital under the Mental Health Act Section 2, and she was treated for the manifestations of the mental disorder. So the Section 2 had now expired, and she was medically fit for discharge. So they wanted to discharge her from hospital, but there was no, children's services couldn't find a suitable placement in the community. I think eventually the plan was to go back to family, but they needed to have some interim arrangement. And the CAMHS service had assessed her as not requiring a CAMHS bed, which is, I don't know if those people know, it's almost impossible to get a CAMHS bed in this day and age. So she's on a medical ward, an adult medical ward in a Manchester hospital. 2-to-1 supervision on the ward. She's been seen by the liaison service, given oral sedative medication and physical restraint if required. I think every time she went to the toilet, staff would go with her because of the level of risk of suicide. She lacked capacity to give consent. And the mental, well, not the trust, the medics, the hospital said that we shouldn't be using the Mental Health Act in this case because she doesn't need to be in hospital and less restrictive care could be provided outside hospital. So they went to court. He took it to court and said, can you help us, court? What do you think the judge decided in this case? Anybody got any thoughts about what conclusions the judge came to? Anybody?
That it was appropriate for her to be placed on a Section 3
Yeah.
for
So
further treatment and long-term planning.
Yeah, the judge,
care.
Judge Burrows, who's a barrister, who's been practicing in the Northwest for a long time. Some of us might have come across him. He basically went through this and said basically she lacks capacity and she's objecting to being in hospital. So even basically the hospital applied to the court to basically use, because she's under 18, they can't use DOLS. So they went to the court to say, can the court issue a deprivation of liberty using its inherent jurisdiction? And the judge said no, she's an objecting mental health patient. The fact that she's on a medical ward doesn't matter. And the fact that there's no alternative based on what's available at the moment, the only available option is the medical ward. A less restrictive placement in the community is not available. And he said, yeah, it's not ideal for her to be detained on a medical ward as a 17-year-old girl. However, based on the options, the other option is she leaves hospital and potentially street homeless. And it's the least worst option. And we could only actually take into consideration when we're looking at these situations, what the actual available options are on the table. So basically, it was a very stern instruction from the judge that they have to use the Mental Health Act in these kind of cases because the person was an objecting mental health patient. Doesn't matter that she's on a medical ward. She was still, the purpose of her being in hospital, she was medically fit for discharge. The purpose of her being in hospital was mental health care until she could be discharged. Any questions about that? So just recently, there's been some research by CQC looking at how the Mental Health Act is operated in practice. And they got some concerns, basically, about how this interface is working in practice. So yeah, quite often they found that there was no record of whether the person, this is mental health wards, whether there's the record of capacity in terms of giving consent to the admission. And there seemed to be a belief amongst psychiatrists and mental health nursing staff that if the patient was happy on the ward, who lacked capacity, then they could be an informed patient. They seem to completely disregard Cheshire West and the need for Article 5 safeguards. And they said frequently people who have been discharged from mental health act detention and then referred for DOLS. And that often left a gap of several months, if not longer, between discharge from mental health act and by the time the DOLS is authorised. During that time, the person was unlawfully detained, or the people were unlawfully detained. So this is something the CQC are monitoring quite closely. Got one more scenario for you. Martha. So Martha is a 34-year-old woman. She's been detained in an independent hospital under a Section 3 for 18 months. She's got a diagnosis of learning disability, autism, and recurrent psychotic symptoms. So there's a long previous history of sexual vulnerability and self-harm, and she was admitted to hospital following a fairly serious assault on a support worker whilst experiencing paranoid delusions. So her mental health is now reported to be stable, and her psychotic symptoms are controlled by clozapine, which is a very strong antipsychotic medication. So she's going through the care and treatment review process. So the plan is for her to be discharged to an independent tenancy with continuous 2-to-1 support. But it's going to take several months before she can be discharged from hospital. So Martha's fully adherent with treatment in hospital, and there's been no incidents of aggression for over 12 months. She's very keen to leave hospital to get her own home. So the psychiatrist in charge of her care, the responsible clinician, has made a DOLS referral and has expressed an intention to discharge her from detention under Section 3 because she's now stable and compliant. So I'll give you a minute or two to read that, and then we'll have a vote. What do we think would be the most appropriate legal framework for Martha? Okay, so let's let you vote on this one. Let's see if this is going to work. What would be an appropriate legal framework for Martha's admission? Over to you, people. So remember, we're talking about her legal framework while she remains in hospital. So they can sort. I mean, she will be doled in the community and probably require a cop dole in the community. So we're talking about what are the best safeguards while she remains in hospital. Going to give people another couple of seconds. There's still a few people left to vote. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's end the polling. So the scores: 24% of people said MCA plus DOLS, 52% of people said Mental Health Act, 24% of people said informal admission. So I'm just interested. All three opinions. I'm interested to hear a different person. Anyone who said informal admission, the 6 people said informal admission. Is anyone wanting to share with us or willing to share with us why they said informal admission? Go on, Steph.
Yeah, it's not specific around capacity. So obviously, if a capacity assessment's been done and she has capacity and, you know, she's agreeing to remain on the ward until the accommodation's ready, it would be, informal, absolutely. Whereas if she lacks capacity, then she'd need a legal framework.
Perfect. Yeah, that's spot on. So just because she's got a learning disability and psychosis, we still have to start with the assumption she's got capacity. We have to do a capacity assessment. Is she aware of what she's agreeing to in terms of remaining in hospital for a couple of months? And if she's got capacity, she could give consent to voluntary admission. I prefer the word voluntary to informal. People who said Mental Health Act, does anybody want to share? I think there were 13 people said Mental Health Act. Anybody want to share with us your rationale?
Yeah, I did a Mental Health Act assessment. I was looking more at the reporting that she was desperate to leave hospital and looking at that as an objection.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, you're saying basically that, yeah, she's desperate to leave hospital, erring on the side of caution, that even if she lacks capacity and she's objecting, or even if she has capacity and she's objecting, we have to use the Mental Health Act. Good.
Yeah, I was going down the route of if she did have capacity, but she does look like she's objecting. So yeah, erring on the side of caution.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting. I suppose you'd need to check out exactly what she said by that. If she was saying that, so yeah, I'm really keen to leave hospital. I've been here for a while. So I'm just desperate to get my own home, but I'm happy to stay in hospital until it can be sorted out. Then she may not be an objecting patient. We need to delve a little bit further. And for those people who said MCA and DOLS, if she wasn't objecting, if you had a conversation with her, firstly, if you assessed the capacity, and she was felt to lack capacity to give consent. And secondly, if you sort of had a bit more of a conversation with her about her attitude to being in hospital, and she said, yeah, I'm really keen to leave hospital, but yeah, I appreciate it's going to take a couple of months and I'm happy to stay here until it can be sorted out. Then again, potentially, in that circumstance, MCA plus DOLS could be an option for her. The proviso would be is that the psychiatrist shouldn't discharge the Section 3 until the DOLS assessment has been completed and it's in place. So everyone was right in terms of their answer for this one. All 3 answers could potentially be right. Any questions or any thoughts about that? Or anything I've said that people want me to clarify? Okay. If anyone I'm coming up to the end. I want you just a few more minutes, really. Anyone interested in this specifically? I don't know why that star's gone there. The Mental Health Act Code of Practice from 2015, Chapter 13 is about the interface. It's pretty turgid. It's really it's quite difficult to read. If you want to hack it, so to speak, paragraphs 1411 to 1425 will take you a couple of minutes to read, and they will tell you everything you really need to know about this interface. I've put all the resources there. The key case here that sort of this interface stems from is the AM versus Slam case from 2013. This was the one given by the washing machine and tumble dryer judge. But I actually wouldn't advise reading it. It's pretty heavy going. But yeah, if you want to know more, have a look at the Mental Health Act Code of Practice. Probably chapter 14, those paragraphs there, probably tell you exactly how much you need to know. So learning objective from today, to hopefully by, we said midday, people should have an understanding, an applied understanding of a model they can use to determine when a person needs to be in hospital for mental health care, whether to use Mental Health Act or MCA DOLS. Just to sort of say, just really emphasise, this only applies in hospital. If somebody's in a care home in the community and they're objecting, we can use DOLS. We can use DOLS. The Mental Health Act only applies where somebody needs to be in hospital for mental health care. In every other situation, we can use DOLS. In fact, DOLS is the only available Article 5 safeguard. So I'm going to ask, just Andrea, can you pause the recording or stop the recording? And I mean, I'm happy to knock around for, well, however long. If people have got any questions and want to speak off record, I'm fine with that. Before people go,